Welcome. I'm Melonie Nielsen, the owner of the Vancouver Yoga Center, and thanks for coming to this mini workshop on how to improve your breathing. Breathing is something that we do constantly throughout the day. We do about 20,000 breaths a day. And since we do it so much, wouldn't it make sense to make our breathing better? Breathing has so many functions in the body, and it improves so many functions in our body. It improves our digestion, our circulation, our cardiovascular health, our energy, our mood. It can make our mind calm, and it can make our mind agitated if it's erratic. It can help our posture even. And you will feel that later in this workshop as we explore some of these movements to free our breath up, how it also frees our posture up. We're going to look at three key parts of our body. We're going to look at our lungs, our diaphragm, and our ribs. Our lungs, if we were to spread our lungs out, they would be the size of a tennis court. That is pretty significant. It's pretty huge. So I think it speaks to how vital the lungs are. The diaphragm, which is a muscle below the ribs, is a key muscle. It is the key muscle in breathing. It brings the air in and facilitates the air out. If this muscle stops working, then we stop working. There are other muscles in our body, if they got injured and they couldn't function, we could still keep functioning. But the diaphragm is so key that if it stops, we stop. And then we have our ribs, and we call our ribs the rib cage. And it's less of a cage and it's more of a accordion that helps us to breathe. So we will look at these three areas of our body and these three components and free them up a bit more. We call to yoga often for breathing exercises, and there are many breathing techniques within yoga. But I think a little more interesting than spending 5 or 10 minutes on a breathing exercise is more to learn about how our breathing happens, it functions in our body, and how to get out of the way of stopping that process from functioning well. Oftentimes, we hinder our own breath, or we've learned some bad breathing habits. So if we can learn how our body is supposed to move and how our body is supposed to breathe, then maybe we can get out of our way and allow that to happen a bit more. And the breathing techniques of yoga are wonderful and they are good exercises, but let's free up our breath and make our breath better all day long so that every moment, every breath is its own breathing exercise. So let's begin to free up these parts of our body, to free up our breath, and see what happens. So let's do some basic sensory exercises that help get us into our body and feeling our body a little bit more. Think of them as massages. They feel a bit like a massage. So take one hand to the back of your neck and then the other hand on top of that. And then you're going to squeeze the back of the neck and let it relax. Squeeze and let it go. And you want it just to feel good. So you're just squeezing to the point that feels good and letting go. Squeezing and letting go. And then even lean to one side, give a little squeeze, and then come back up and squeeze. And then you squeeze as you go to one side, then you unsqueeze as you come back. Let's do that again. We squeeze and back. You just breathe in and out of your nostrils as you do this. Other side and back. One more to each side. Breathing in through the nostrils, out through the nostrils. So as we breathe in and out through the nostrils, it helps to purify our air, cleanse our air, and ready it for the body. Now let's bring your head back to center, and then we're going to still cup, but you're going to squeeze as you bow your head a little. And then back. Maybe that's on an exhale. So exhale, you bow. And inhale, you come back up. And exhale, you bow. Inhale, you come back up. And one more. Exhale and bow. And inhale back up. And as you do, let your arms relax. Breathe and feel this area of the body. And even so, it might even be that you are more able to more easily breathe now. It just feels more spacious, more open, more relaxed, and the whole rest of the body goes, I can take a breath into that space. Then let's take a hand to the top of your shoulder here and give a little squeeze and a little let go. Like you're squeezing a sponge. Squeeze it out and let it go. And maybe it's with the inhale that you squeeze and the exhale you let go. It could be the opposite of that, and that is fine. As long as you're just continuing to breathe in and breathe out. Now let's let that go and just compare the sides. See if one side seems a little longer, a little freer. You were to take a deep breath in, and you were to visualize each side. Which side of your body would you imagine that you could breathe more into? Just with that little bit of work. And then do the other side. And squeeze the top and let it go. And squeeze the top and let it go. And squeeze and let go. And squeeze and let go. And then just let all of that go and just notice your breathing. Without trying so hard to breathe, you're just noticing the breath. And if already the breath has changed a little bit, in that little bit of work we did to get into our body. Now, as we're going to talk about the lungs and the ribs and the diaphragm, where are all of these things? Most of us know where the rib cage is, and that is pretty vast. It goes quite far down onto our lower back, quite far down onto our sides. Some of us, there's our pelvis and there's our ribs, and there's not much space between those two. You were to try to put your fingers in between them. And some have a little bit of a gap there. So the ribs are quite vast. And the lungs, where are the lungs? So most of us think, well, they're the front of our chest or sides of our rib cage. They are vast. So my shirt kind of represents the vastness of the lungs. The lungs go all the way up above the top of your clavicle. They go a little bit above what's called the first rib. The first rib is just a little bit below that clavicle. So they go up towards that clavicle. They encompass all where the ribs are. So they go down, like the shape of the ribs, all the way towards the back where the kidneys are. So if you were to see my shirt, it's pretty much where the ribs are. And the shirt is also, pretty much where the lungs are, but yes, also the ribs. And now the diaphragm is this muscle that goes below the lungs. So if you found your bones in the front, you find your sternum bone, and you go at the base of the sternum just slightly higher than that. This is roughly our fifth rib, that our diaphragm starts there on the inside, underside of the rib cage. And then it follows the base of the rib cage all the way back and all the way down. So it is very dome shaped, like a cup, like a dome. And we will talk about the diaphragm more in a little bit. Let's tap the areas of the lungs. So imagine where the lungs, they go all the way up to the top of the shoulders, basically, front of the chest, up in the armpits, sides of the rib cage, down even to this kind of lower quadrant of the back. And you're tapping all of this. Just do one side right now, as much as you can. It's a little harder to get the back of the lungs, but the lungs go all the way back there too. The front, you go down at the bottom of the ribs here, all the way. And so you're tapping, you're bringing your brain aware of this area of your body. And then if we stop tapping, pause and notice this whole side of your body feels probably very different than the other side of the body. And if you were to take a really deep breath in, which lung feels like you have more awareness of expansion? more feeling of expansion. I'm going to guess that was the side that we just tapped. So let's tap the other side and gain the whole of the lungs, the full capacity of the lungs, fullness of the lungs. We're tapping all around that area. Lean to one side as needed. Tap, tap, tap. Try to get into the back of the body, where the kidneys are, just above the kidneys. Tapping all around. It's a simple little thing to do, but it's actually quite calming to the muscles. And tapping can help improve even range of motion. And then let that go. So deep breaths in, full breaths out. So the lungs, why it's important to know that they go all the way up here to the top is because our shoulders and our neck can affect our breathing. So if we have tight, intense shoulders, or clenching our jaw and tightening our neck muscles, that all of that can help, well, not help, it can make our breathing more restricted. So if we free up this neck and shoulder area, then because it's attached to the lungs, that will free up our breathing as well. So that might be why we felt, as we kind of gave that sensory massage to those areas, that we could breathe a bit better already. So let's do a little bit more on freeing up the neck and the shoulders. Let's start, because the jaw relates with these muscles of the neck. Let's start taking our fingers and tapping the jaw. You can soften the jaw so there's a little space between your upper and lower teeth. And you tap around. You can also do little circles, base of the jaw. And then I let that go. And then with your inhale, shrug your shoulders towards your ears. And with your exhale, just drop. Inhale, shrug. And exhale, drop. Inhale, shrug. And exhale, drop. Now do shoulder rolls, but let's do it with the breath. So we're inhaling as we go up and exhaling as we go back and down. So it's inhale as we go forward and up, and exhale as we go back and down. Inhaling forward and up, exhaling back and down. Inhaling forward, up, exhaling back and down. One more. Inhale forward, up, exhale back and down. And even just pause for a moment. And just notice your posture. That wasn't a big exercise that we did. It was very simple and short. But even in that, I bet you kind of felt like your posture is being held a little differently. And it's not that you have to hold your posture a certain way or lift your chest up so that you can breathe better. It was the simple little motions that freed us up and changed our posture, and it helped our breathing. So they do go hand in hand. Now let's take a hand onto a shoulder, and let's just circle the shoulder. I'm going to leave the rest of my body pretty still for a moment, and I'm circling. And then reverse circles. So this is just the shoulder joint. I want to get now the ribs to be a little more involved. And I'm going to do this with the breath. So I take my elbows forward, inhale, up, and I'm going to stretch up even the ribs. And then exhale back and down. I feel like you're rotating a little. Inhale forward, up to where I'm opening up the front of the ribs. Exhale back and down. Inhale forward, up. Exhale back and down. Let's do one more. Inhale forward, up. Exhale back and down. Now let that rest and breathe. Notice your breathing. Which lung feels more full or more open or more free? And then let's do the other one. Place the other hand on the shoulder. And first we're just going to do shoulder. We're just circling that shoulder. And reverse circle. And then let's do with more ribs involved. So you take your elbow up and back and down. Let's do it with the breath. You inhale forward and up. Exhale back and down. Inhale forward, up. Exhale back, down. Inhale forward, up. Exhale back, down. Inhale forward, up. Exhale back and down. And let that rest and notice your breath. Notice the posture. Notice the shoulders. Okay, so let's work on strengthening and lengthening our breath. So our diaphragm, when it moves, it has parts of it that are contracting and parts of it that are lengthening. So it's strengthening and it's lengthening. The muscle fibers are getting shorter and then the muscle fibers are getting longer. So our diaphragm that sits at the base of these ribs here essentially and the bottom of the lung capacity, the lungs, when we inhale, the breath comes in. So the breath comes in because the diaphragm presses down. And it pushes down into this abdominal cavity that we'll talk about in a moment. So it presses down. In that pressing down, the lungs get stretched and they become a vacuum. They suck air in. And then when we exhale, the air, essentially the lungs really all they would love to do is just collapse. So it's the diaphragm kind of slowing things down for the breath to come out slowly. So the diaphragm will go back in and up when you exhale. So it goes down on the inhale and it goes up on the exhale. And essentially, let's interlock our fingers here. So think of the fingers, if they came together, that's muscles shortening. Those muscle fibers shortening, and if they spread apart, they're lengthening. They're getting stretched. So they're strengthening, they're engaging, they're stretching, they're lengthening. So that's the muscle fibers of the diaphragm. So now if we took our interlocked fingers here and made a dome shape, that when we inhale, our diaphragm pushes down and actually those muscle fibers tighten. They get shorter. Our diaphragm actually strengthens on our in-breath, pushing down. And when we exhale, we get the dome that comes back up. It actually gets a stretch to it. The diaphragm is stretching on our exhale. Now, if we're in a constant stress state, or we have not been breathing fully and effectively, then we could be shortening these muscle fibers so they're always in kind of a state of contraction and never fully lengthening. So we want to, more of us need to, in general, lengthen our diaphragm. When we breathe out fully, then it allows for the greater vacuum in of air. So the more we exhale, the more inhale we get in. The more we exhale, the more oxygen we can breathe in. So we want to expand our exhales. And when we do, that is stretching. You're doing a stretch for your diaphragm when you exhale. And you're getting a strength for your diaphragm when you inhale. So if that is helpful for you to do these fingers, we can do that with a few breaths here. So we'll leave them a little loose to start with. And when you inhale, the diaphragm pushes down, so you can take your dome shape and push it down and slide the fingers together. They're engaging. It's getting strong. It's pulling down to suck the air in, essentially, right? That's the muscle has to engage, open up the space for the air to come in. And then when you exhale, then it's lengthening, so the dome shape comes up, but the fibers are stretching. They're getting further apart. You're getting more expansive up into your body. So you inhale, diaphragm pushes down and gets strong. When you exhale, the diaphragm stretches, goes in and up into our body and gets long. Inhale, it goes down, gets strong, and exhale, it comes up and gets long. Inhale, muscle fibers strong. Exhale, long. So just visualize that. Visualizing, you could start with just the down and the up. Inhale, diaphragm goes down. And exhale, diaphragm comes up. Or you can imagine I'm getting stronger in my diaphragm muscle. I'm exercising it with the in-breath. And with the exhale, I'm doing that lengthening stretch component to that muscle. Now, if it's very important for us to exhale fully so that we can have more oxygen come in, here's a little technique that we could do to try to get our breath to be longer. It's breathing with an S sound. So we would do it on the exhale because we're trying to emphasize the length of the exhale. So if you wish to join me, take a big breath in. And with the exhale to an S. Now we're going to keep doing this, but try not to force the exhale. You're just doing the S until it stops. And you're not trying to add more on. It's not that forced contraction. So you're just letting it out, and then big breath comes in. So big breath in, and exhale. Big breath in, and exhale. My hands more just representing the S sound and not the movement of the diaphragm. So essentially, the movement of the diaphragm, we inhale, diaphragm goes down, and exhale. Diaphragm comes up. Inhale. And exhale. One more. Inhale. And exhale. Now, when our inhale occurs and the diaphragm goes down, what's below the diaphragm is all of the organs. So they have to move out of the way as the diaphragm is coming down on top of them. So when you press down, the organs are also pressing down. We might even feel that in our pelvic floor. The pelvic floor actually has to widen a bit to make some more space and be stronger. And then the belly presses outward. So if you've ever done any exercises where they said for you to pull in your belly and then continue to breathe, it's impossible. It's just not how our anatomy is being made. And it could actually stress your diaphragm. So let's try that as an experiment. So you're going to pull in your core, you're going to zipper up the front, tighten everything in the front here, engaging your core essentially. And try that and try to do our deep diaphragmatic breath that we just did. Try to allow the diaphragm to go down when we're holding that in. And you probably found it really hindered your breath. It was not able to do that. It's impossible to do that. So really, actually, core strength involves us being able to still diaphragmatically breathe, even if we're having some engagement of the middle. If we are not able to move the diaphragm, then we're engaging too much and we're hardening and we're holding and we're probably creating more stress and tension in our body and not getting to the final goal that we hope to get to in that exercise. So we want to be able to still move our diaphragm even when we're doing movements, even when we're doing exercises, even when we're doing core exercise. Our actual first core muscle is not these six-pack abs on the outside. Those are superficial muscles. The first core muscle, true core muscle, is your diaphragm. So if your diaphragm is not functioning very well and properly, like it's supposed to go through its full range of motion, then you're essentially not strengthening your true core. So let's practice a little bit with this visualization of the diaphragm goes down and the abdomen comes out. And then the abdomen comes in and the diaphragm comes up. So we can model with our hands. You put a hand to shape the dome of your diaphragm, so right at the bottom of your breastbone, and then a hand in front of your abdomen. And when you inhale, the diaphragm's going to go down and the organs are going to go out. And when you exhale, the organs are going to come in and the diaphragm's going to go up. So let's play with that, almost like a moving sensory meditation here. So we inhale, diaphragm down, abdomen out. And we exhale, diaphragm up, abdomen in. Inhale, diaphragm down, abdomen out. And we exhale, diaphragm up, abdomen in. A few more. Inhale, diaphragm down, abdomen out. Exhale, the abdomen naturally comes in and the diaphragm buoyantly lifts up. Inhale. And exhale. And then pause. Just notice what you notice. How has your breathing shifted and changed? Without you now trying to do any form of breathing, you just let your breathing go. And are you really letting your breathing go? So the diaphragm can do what the diaphragm needs to do, and the abdomen does what the abdomen needs to do when you breathe. Because some of us might hold a little tension in our abdomen, some of us might hold a little tension in the neck. And can we let go of our hindering of our breathing by letting our breathing do what it really needs to do? So that's the diaphragm. We have the lungs to their fullness. They're expanding in all capacity. And when we fully exhale, it's like letting all the breath out, enables more of a vacuum of breath to come in. We have this upper portion of our lungs that's very important as well. So if our diaphragm goes down, our collarbone actually floats up. And there's that drawing in the air, right? And then the pushing out of the air. So the balloon that vacuums in and presses out. So see if you could find your clavicle, your collarbone, go a little closer to the neck. You see these muscles that sometimes run and stick out. There is, right before you get to that, there's a muscle called the scalenes. And these muscles on the sides of your neck go down and they attach the first and second rib. But also remember that the lungs are coming up to meet that first rib. And so your lungs go that far, and the muscle there of the neck is trying to help so that when your diaphragm goes down, everything doesn't just push down. So we want an element to stay up while the rest goes down. If everything's pushed down, we wouldn't have the space to take our breath in there. The cavity would still be empty. So if one part goes up and one part goes down, now we have the volume. We have this expansive space that our breath goes into. So the upper part has to rise while the lower part has to go down. So if you just take a few deep breaths, you might even be able to feel some engagement underneath your fingers here. The scalene muscle actually pushes sometimes the fingers out as it engages because its engagement is too short, meaning its engagement is to bring the collarbone up towards the ears and then back down with the exhale. So let's take our fingers to the sides of the neck, and when we inhale, let's give a light, little, very soft touch on the sides of the neck, a little pull, a gentle pull upward with our inhale. And then with our exhale, let's just let it flow down. Our inhale, we're going to bring a light pulling up. You don't have to make your neck as long as you can be. It's just feeling that the tissue is lengthening a little bit. And then with the exhale, it lightly, softly flows back down. Another way we could do this is take the hand to the back of the neck like we did at the very beginning, but take the other hand to the skull. So one hand on the back of the neck, one hand on the skull. And when you inhale, give a light little pulling up. And when you exhale, allow it to flow back down. It's like a little bit of traction, stretch of the neck. So inhale, pulls up, and exhale. It's a very subtle softening down. Inhale, draws up, and exhale, it softens down. Again, inhale up, and exhale down. Now let's try to do the opposite, just to confirm for ourselves that this is actually a thing, that the clavicle, collarbone goes up with our inhale. Let's put our hands on our head, and when we inhale, give a little pressure. Be gentle on your body though, but a little pressure down, as if you were trying to stop the flow upward, right? So if we inhale, we push down on our head a little bit. How did that feel? To me, that feels like I can't breathe. So if I let my body do what my body is supposed to do, my body is supposed to float up with the inhale of this upper portion and then float a little down with the exhale. Now can we put the two things together? We put one hand at where the collarbone is, one hand where the diaphragm is. And with the in-breath, collarbone up, diaphragm down. And with the exhale, they come towards each other. Inhale, diaphragm down, collarbones up. And exhale, they come closer together. Inhale up. Remember also the abdomen's going out. That's now much more multi-dimensional happening there. Inhale, diaphragm down, belly out as the clavicle's rising. And then exhale, breathing kind of comes in towards each other. Inhale, they move away. And exhale, they move in towards each other. Those are embodiments, I call them. You could call them exercises of really just watching and noticing your body do its own exercises and not trying to do the opposite of that. We already know if we try to do the opposite, if we try to pull in our belly while we breathe, it's hard to take a deep breath in. And if we try to pull down our neck or stay short, not let this upper part, because maybe we've been told not to breathe up here because all the best breathing is down here. That's so not true. All the best breathing is letting our body do what it needs to do, which means this area has to move, the diaphragm has to move, the ribs have to move. So that's our next component, is the ribs. So you have every rib that has muscles between the ribs. So in a very simplified version of this, we can imagine that the ribs, when we inhale, they open away from each other, and then they exhale, they come closer to each other. It's much more complex than that. There's much more going on, but I'll save that for a more detailed course on breathing later. But essentially, the ribs should move, and every rib space should have some movements between them. So let's take fingers to the sides of our ribs, whichever is the easiest rib for you to find. You're going to find your rib, and you're going to go put fingers in the space between the ribs. So 2 ribs, one down here, one up there, and your fingers, right finger is in the space between. And now with a finger between the space between, can you butt up against the upper rib and then push down against the lower rib? So you can kind of move your finger up and down a little bit like that. And now we have 2 fingers. We have one on the uppermost rib that I'm touching and one finger on the lower part of the ribs. And we're going to lean a little to one side and see if we can get them to feel, or us to feel the space between the two ribs when we go to one side and when we come back up. We go to one side, the upper rib, you're going to pull it open a little, and then back down. So now, really this happens with our breathing. When we take a breath in, there should be a little space there. Maybe as you breathe here with a straight spine first, feel if a little more space gets created. And then when you exhale, if those two bones don't come towards each other. Little space on the inhale. It's very subtle, a little less space on the exhale. Now we can accentuate this even more by what we just did, but we're going to combine it with the breath, which is more appropriate. So when we inhale, we'll lean to one side because we're helping to open that space through our stretch, and then we're opening that space through our inhale. And then exhale, back to center. Inhale. Exhale, back to center. Inhale, we're going to give a little extra pull of those two away from each other. And exhale, back to center. Inhale. And exhale, center. Now we can keep going through as many ribs as we can find, and we can make that a very lovely exercise and freeing the rib cage. So every rib that you could feel and palpate, you could do that too. But for now, let's pause and just notice that side of the body from the other side and see if it doesn't feel a little different. It doesn't feel maybe a little more open or spacious. If you were to take a deeper breath in and you could imagine the two lungs, is one breathing a bit more, has a little more space in it than the other side. And then let's do the other side. So we're going to find ribs. I'm going to get a finger on an upper rib and a finger on a lower rib that are touching, a little close to touching. And with my inhale, lean to one side. I'm going to visualize too. This is like a yawn. The ribs are opening, and then exhale, they're closing. It's like a yawn would. Open your mouth as you go to the side, and exhale, close it. So find a rib or two, and you can move to different ones if you wish. And as you lean to one side, you're going to give a little extra pull that upper one away from the lower one. And then exhale, back to center. Now, as you do a few more of those, we could add in also, what does our diaphragm do? Because our diaphragm has to keep doing what the diaphragm does. So when we inhale, the diaphragm goes down. So essentially, there's a bigger stretch happening. The diaphragm is getting even more of a stretch as we go to the side on our inhale. And then exhale, the muscles is bringing us back to center. Inhale. Diaphragm goes down and the ribs go up. There's a little extra component there. And then exhale, the diaphragm comes up as the ribs go down. Inhale, diaphragm down, ribs up. And then exhale. It's kind of like opening like a fan and then closing the fan. Pause, breathe, and just notice the body. And notice your breath. So once again, dome at the top of the collarbone with your hand, dome at the base of your ribs where your diaphragm is. With our inhale, the ribs, the upper ribs, first and second rib and collarbone float up, diaphragm floats down, and exhale, they come towards each other. When that happens, the diaphragm goes down, the belly goes out. And exhale, comes together. The ribs essentially float up, float out, and draw back in, and draw back down. Now our ribs have different sections. We have this upper section, we have this middle section, and we have our lower floaty ribs way in the back here. And they do a little bit different stuff. The upper ribs, you could think of them as a little bit of movement like this. Goes up and goes down, almost like a little bow. Down a little, up a little. So that's it's floating up and sinking down. Our collarbone has a little curve to it. And so when we breathe, it rolls a bit. And the same with those ribs. They roll a bit. The ribs down here, they more go out. So if my diaphragm and my elbows are the ribs and my hands are the diaphragm, when my diaphragm goes down, my elbows, aka ribs, flare out. And then my diaphragm comes in, my ribs go down. So remember, this is inhale. We're making space for the breath. And then exhale, everything's coming back together. But it's actually stretching this muscle of the diaphragm. There's an expansion. And then there's this shortening of the space inside. Now we have these very back floaty ribs. If you took your hands all the way to the back and you can kind of find where you imagine your kidneys to be. And if you follow around, you might be able, for some people, to actually feel where the ribs of number 11 and number 12 stop. And for some folks, that's a little bit more tricky to find. But let's just say it's at this edge of the waistline. And these lower floaty ribs, when we inhale, they widen out, and they exhale, they kind of cinch back in. Widen, like they're opening their arms, and exhale, they close. That might be a bit of a stretch in visualization, but maybe it gets you into thinking about the back of your body a little bit more. Remember, our diaphragm goes all the way back here, so it is creating a pull on the area in the back as well. So we breathe, opening, think of this back kind of expanding, and then exhale, it kind of contracts a little. Expands a little wider, and draws in a bit. Our ribs on the sides expand out as our diaphragm goes down, and back in. Our collarbone floats up and floats down. So many things to pause and to explore and to get interested in our breathing. So that is good breathing. Being able to move all of the parts that are supposed to move, that's our exercise for breathing. And it should be natural, but we've kind of trained ourselves out of it a little bit. Through our stresses, I think, of life and events, we have hindered some of this movement in our body. So I'm hoping you can allow for these movements to come back into your body, to experience a deeper quality of breath, and think about these things throughout the day, or when you're getting stressed, when you're feeling anxiety, come to some of these awarenesses. The S breath, the movements, really feeling the breath in the body, or just these simple sensory massages that you can do for yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you more in future workshops, and be well.